Yo, what's up guys, Alf here, and today I'm going to be doing a full in-depth deck breakdown of a historic deck that I've been doing really well with both on the ladder and in the recent metagame challenge as well, and it's also my current frontrunner to be running in the qualifier. This does feel like the best deck in the format to me right now anyway. Now before I get into it, I just want to quickly say sorry again for the lack of videos over the past month. Basically what's happened is I've been trying out a bunch of brews, but none of them have really felt good enough. You know, they were good in early testing, but as I tested them more, they just didn't really feel good enough, so I bin them and then move on to something else. So in order to keep the content out there and make sure that uploads are regular going forwards, I'm going to be bringing back the Under the Meta video series to cover those sorts of decks that are good and interesting but not quite good enough to be top tier. And then also I feel like sharing those, you know, it's interesting content because those sorts of deck ideas are stuff that doesn't really get played as often a lot of the time. And also if people have good ideas in the comments of ways to improve these decks, that would be awesome as well. And then secondly, I don't really personally like uploading deck guide videos of pre-established decks unless I'm innovating on them. You know, I always want the deck guides that I upload to be something new and interesting. However, especially with the upcoming qualifier being in historic, since this Necrodominance Sorin deck is the only deck I've come up with recently that I really feel is like a top tier deck in the format, what I'm going to be doing over the next couple of weeks is basically just going through the entire format, going through all of the top pre-established decks and just bringing you my current builds of them, how I've adapted them for the current metagame, new tech and stuff like that, just so everyone's prepared for the qualifier and I can just keep the videos coming out more regularly. Now before I get into the details of this deck, I've already put out a full deck guide article for MTG's own premium. It's over 5,000 words. I think it's the biggest deck guide I've ever done. Full detail of, you know, the entire deck, more detail that I'm going to get to in this video, and also a sideboard guide, and I mentioned what my thoughts are on best of one. So if you're a premium member, I'll have a link to that down in the description as well. But anyway, with that all out of the way, this is my Golgari Necrodominance Sorin deck in historic. So I still think Sorin and Lender is the best thing to be doing in the format right now. But my issue with this is that I do feel like there are a number of decks in the format that are capable of naturally just going over the top of a Lender. Obviously, there are a number of infinite combo decks in the format, but even outside of that, there are some decks that their natural game plan, even without comboing, goes bigger than you, like Auras or Devotion, for example. So for me, when I'm building with Sorin and Lender, it's really important to either pair it with a bunch of interaction, especially with discard spells, so that you can keep those combo decks that are capable of going bigger than you off their game plan. Then you can land Sorin and Lender and close the game out while they're scrambling to then assemble their combo. Or you pair it with a plan B that's capable of going infinite, so you can just race the combo decks, like the Jund builds that are also running Emperor of Bones and Ulamog, for example. So for that reason, I'm personally not a massive fan of Orzhov or Abzan, unless you're running builds that you know, cut some of the plan B to run more discard spells, especially. And then the Jund builds, I do still think Jund is a very good deck, but I do feel recently that the format has been adapting slightly. I've seen a lot more surgical extraction, which makes the game plan with Ulamog a lot more risky. And also I feel like there's a lot more moving pieces in the Jund build, right? Outside of Sorin and Lender, for your plan B of Emperor of Bones Ulamog, you need to get the Ulamog in the graveyard. Your only two ways of doing it are Faithless Looting and Rumble. So there's a lot more moving pieces, which makes you more vulnerable to opposing interaction like discard spells, and also just, you know, makes you more vulnerable to certain pieces of interaction like surgical, and just makes the deck a little bit less consistent, if that makes sense. So I started looking at some other engines to pair with Sorin and Lender, and I feel like Necrodominance Shielded is such an underplayed package in historic. I feel like Necrodominance as a card is just super underplayed considering how powerful it is, and it works super well within this shell as well. So first of all, going to look at Sorin and Lender. I mean, we don't have to go too much into this. If you played the format, you know how powerful this is. I really want Sorin to get nerfed. Knock a loyalty off it, then it dies when you -3, which reduces the power level quite a lot. Right now, feels a bit too ubiquitous to me, but Sorin and Lender, like I said, I want to have a lot of discard spells with it. And the really nice thing about pairing it with Necrodominance Shielded is, first of all, the package is just so small. It's 7 cards compared to like 12 if we look at Jund, where you got Looting, Emperor of Bones, Ulamog, and that on its own just means that we can run a ton of interaction, right? We can run 8 pieces of spot removal, in Fatal Push and Abrupt Decay, 8 pieces of discard, and then additionally, you know, since we have so many slots for interaction, it makes sideboarding super easy, so we're so flexible. We can pivot a lot better than most of the other decks in the format, which is absolutely huge. Secondly, they're both great individual cards on their own. Necrodominance is phenomenal. You know, if we just slam it on turn 3. Speaking of which, another really nice synergy here is Assemble the Team is one of the best cards with Sorin and Elenda because it really increases your chances of getting Sorin and Elenda on turn 3. But if you can't find the second piece or you don't have either, using Assemble the Team just to grab a Necrodominance is a really, really good play as well. You know, we've seen in the past with Jund, using Assemble to get Jasters is really nice. Using Assemble to get Necrodominance feels even more powerful here. So it kind of makes Assemble the Team a good hit no matter what in the early game, which is absolutely huge as well. Obviously, Necrodominance is also phenomenal with Shieldred. If you have this in play and Shieldred in play and the opponent doesn't run any burn, you can just at the end step pay all but 1 of your life, and then you gain 2 for everything you draw. You can basically completely sculpt your hands. Obviously, this does require us to be careful with our life total, but we have so much life gain in the deck. We have Sorin and Elenda, which is huge, Shieldred as well, and since we're only a 2-color deck, the mana base isn't that painful. I'll talk about stuff like Boggart Trawler a little bit later, but Necrodominance and Shieldred, just great cards on their own. Shieldred itself, I mean, obviously a 4-mana creature is kind of slow and historic, but right now there aren't that many decks running clean ways to run it. Obviously some decks are running Fragment Reality, but if they fragment Shieldred, we get Boggart Trawler, and considering most of the fragment decks are Sorin decks, getting a free Boggart Trawler is great when the opponent's on Overlord and Emperor of Bones as well. Obviously a number of decks do run Fatal Push, but not that many decks outside of the Sacrifice decks are good at triggering Revolt at will. You know, especially in the mirror match, we're not running Prismatic Vista in this build, so, you know, Shieldred is actually surprisingly hard to kill with the current removal suite that a lot of decks are running, and there are also decks that just naturally die to this anyway, that are drawing a lot as part of their game plan, that are also naturally bad matchups for Sorin and Elenda. First of all, Lotus Field combo, right? The big issue running a discard spell deck against Lotus Field is that they can just top deck out of it, right? And having Shieldred in play, their whole deck revolves around drawing, so it just kills them super quick unless they have a way to bounce it. So, you know, Shieldred helps to improve that matchup that Sorin and Elenda is naturally bad against. And then similarly, Devotion, also a very tricky matchup for Sorin and Elenda decks, not only because the infinite combo with Team Battle Crier goes over the top, but also their natural game plan goes over the top of you as well. And again, Shieldred really punishes them for drawing off Outcast a Trailblazer, and also punishes them for drawing off Cura as well. So Shieldred, you know, not only pairs incredibly well with Necrodominance, but it's also good against a number of the decks that Sorin and Elenda isn't good against as well, which is absolutely huge. So I just feel like this self-contained package is so strong. It works so well with decks that are running a bunch of cheap removal, because you can, you know, use a couple of discard spells, then just use Necrodominance to completely refuel your hand as well. So this package not only synergizes really well with Sorin, works really well with on its own, and then gives us a ton of room for interaction as well. So speaking of which, 4 Thoughtseize, 4 Break Expectations just feel like the best 2 discard spells in the format right now. Obviously Thoughtseize losing life does kind of have some tension with Necrodominance, but like I said, we have so much life gain here, and the mana base is relatively unpainful. Could consider triggering Boggart Trawler if you want to go even further in that direction, but doesn't really matter too much. But discard spells are super important right now because, like I said, Sorin and Elenda can lose to decks that go bigger than you. Decks that go bigger than you always get hit by the discard spells, so this really helps to kind of shore up those matchups. Outside of that, it's just pretty good across the board game 1, and then post sideboard, if you are against a deck that's running, you know, generically powerful threats where the discard spells aren't as good, or an aggro deck, for example, we can just pivot and then cut them for, you know, extra removal or hate cards depending on what the matchup is. Break Expectations, obviously worse than Thoughtseize for the most part, doesn't hit 1-drops and does give them a card off the spellbook, but for the most part, especially with this build, the spellbook cards really don't do much, and the fact that this Exiles is very relevant, especially against decks running Overlord of the Belmerk. So yeah, I really like 8 main deck discard spells, and then we've also got a couple more duress in the sideboard to lean into that a little bit further. Then for spot removal, obviously Fatal Push, best removal spell in the format right now. If the mirror match does become popular and being able to kill 3 and 4 drops is very important, then I could also see trimming down to 1 Boggart Trawler. Still want 1 so that you can get a creature if the opponent fragments the Shieldred, but then you could replace those with Prismatic Vista, which then gives us a way to very easily trigger Revolt on Fatal Push. So something to bear in mind if the metagame does adapt a little bit. And then for Abrupt Decay in the main deck as well, I really, really like this card right now. Not only does it give us extra removal against creatures, the fact it can't be countered is really relevant against auras because it kind of bypasses Sheltered by Ghosts, But the fact it can also just answer commonly played non-creatures is really huge as well. It can take out Pithing Needle, which is absolutely massive, means we don't need to board in an answer to the most commonly played hate cards. You know, kills stuff like Birthing Ritual, Goblin Bombardment, opposing Sorins as well. So Abrupt Decay just feels so well positioned right now. And running 4 in the main deck also makes sideboarding super easy as well. And then, like I said, Assemble the Team works so well with Sorin plus Elenda, but it can also find Necrodominance if we don't have anything else. If we have Necrodominance, we can use it to find Shieldred, and if we've already got what we need, we can just use it to find one of our, 1 or 2 mana pieces of interaction, and then usually in the mid to late game, we have that mana spare to just cast it immediately. So Assemble the Team, just so big for consistency in the deck. Then moving on to the mana base, we got 21 lands plus 4 Boggart Trawlers, so 25 lands in total, which seems like a lot, but this is a deck that really needs to be hitting its 3rd land on curve. Both of our powerful plays are 3 drops, and especially with Assemble the Team, missing your 3rd land on curve is an absolute disaster, because you never ever want to, unless you absolutely have to, use Assemble the Team to find a land. So 25 lands ensures, well, not ensures, but really increases the chances that we'll have our 3rd land on curve in almost every game, which is huge. Plus, we're also running a 4-drop here, and we do want to cast this on curve in a lot of matchups as well. So 25 lands, I feel like, is important to cast our main threats here. Obviously, with Necrodominance, we do need to be very careful of our life total, and we do run some lands in here, especially Boggart Trawler, that does deal damage to ourselves. But in my testing, that's not really been an issue so far. I think if the format devolves into more aggro or Goblin Bombardment decks, then it is probably worth swapping these out for either more creature lands like Hive of the Eye Tyrant, or maybe Prismatic Vista to trigger Revolt and Fatal Push. But right now, I've not found it to be too much of an issue, and having this as a way to mitigate flood, and just having, multiple pieces of graveyard hate in the main deck is very relevant right now against decks running Emperor of Bones, Overlord of the Baelmerk, etc. So I don't mind it here, even though we're running it with Necrodominance. But like I said, if it is an issue, you can swap it out. We obviously want black green jewels, because we need triple green. We need triple black on turn 3 for Necrodominance, but we also need green on turn 2. So we obviously want as many dual lands as possible. The pathway is a little bit awkward, because if we do ever need to put it on green, it does cut us off Necrodominance on turn 3, but we don't have a great option for the next best alternative. I guess Prismatic Vista could potentially be worth running over the pathway here, actually, because then that does give us a way to trigger Revolt and Fatal Push, but then that is also an extra 1 life loss here, so not exactly ideal. Plus, you'd have to run a basic Forest, which would be a little bit awkward with Necrodominance as well. The reason I'm running 3 swamps here, I wasn't on that initially, and in the gameplay coming up that I've got in the Metagame challenge, I believe I was originally running an extra Hive of the Eye Tyrant and a Boseiju instead here, but recently I have seen an influx in a mono-white land destruction deck. There's basically a bunch of Hate Bearers and White Orchid Phantom that they can blink with Felia, and sometimes Field of Ruin and Ghost Quarter as well. So for that reason, I think it's really important to be running basics. And in a deck like this, we really should be running basics as well. It doesn't come at much cost, and it basically just ensures that we don't get cheesed out by those sorts of life gain strategies. And then outside of that, we've got Takenuma and Hive of the Eye Tyrant as just additional utility lands that, kind of hedge against flooding out a little bit more. So that's the main deck. Like I said, I think it's pretty clear that Sorin Elenda is probably the best thing to be doing in the format right now. And this, to me, does feel like it just fixes all of the inherent issues that Sorin Elenda has. And I just feel like the deck is so flexible. Getting to run 12 slots in the main deck dedicated to removal allows you to pivot so well post-sideboard as well. So I've been really happy with the list in general. Speaking of which, let's move on to the sideboard now. So starting off here with 2 copies of Surgical. So this is obviously here is Graveyard Hate. Very, very important against the Jund decks. Not only at cutting them off Ulamog, but a lot of the time they'll be running self-mill stuff. You can sometimes extract Elenda or Sorin as well, which cuts off 2 of their main cards. And then obviously there's a number of other fringe graveyard decks that you might come up against, like Shifting Woodland, Kethis, Reanimator and stuff, where Surgical is great. Now, initially I was running 3 Surgical instead of the Scavenging Ooze here, but I've made a swap to run Scavenging Ooze mainly as a concession against the Fragment Reality decks, to give us a high impact creature to hit if they choose to Fragment Reality Necrodominance. Because as things stand right now, if you play Necro on turn 3 and they fragment, that's just a clean 1 mana to 3 mana trade for the opponent, which is huge for them. Whereas bringing Scavenging Ooze against those Fragment Reality decks, which typically are the decks running Overlord of the Baelmerk and Emperor of Bones and stuff, Scavenging Ooze is great at keeping off a lot of their synergies, gains you a bit of life, and can start dominating the board as well. So that's why I've got a 2-1 split here. And we got a couple copies of Pithing Needle, which obviously, can be brought in a number of matchups against the Sacrifice decks, to name Goblin Bombardment, Even in the mirror match, you can use it to name stuff like Emperor of Bones. You know, you can obviously use it to name Shifting Woodlands, use it to name Khan against Devotion. Number of matchups where this is really useful. Then 2 copies of Stone of Erech, basically here, kind of exclusively for the sacrifice decks because it shuts off all the death triggers from their deck. Basically just shuts down their entire deck until they can answer it. And it can also be used as graveyard hate, even though it is a little bit slow. But if you are against a very all-in graveyard deck like a Kethis or a Shifting Woodland, having access to this to be able to crack at instant speed is really nice. Then we've got Cut Down as just extra cheap interaction, mainly here for auras, but I also like bringing this in against decks like Boros Energy and the 4-color Samwise deck as well. Couple copies of Duress for just any matchup where we need extra discard spells, so mainly against decks like Lotus Field, but Jeskai Control I sometimes bring this in as well, but you know, control combo decks basically where we bring this in. Couple copies of Damping Sphere, basically here exclusively for the Lotus Field matchup, but I feel like the matchup is worth dedicating slots to because I think Lotus Field is naturally kind of resistant to discard spells because they have a lot of good top decks, right? They have a lot of cards that can draw into other missing pieces that they've got. So Damping Sphere is really nice because it enables us to not have to worry about getting, you know, giving the opponent time to draw out of the situation, right? Once Damping Sphere is in play, the opponent just can't combo off because it shuts off Lotus Field and their ability to dig for an answer as well. There are other matchups you can also consider bringing this in, like, you know, this can work against decks like Primal Prayers, for example, or you could also consider this against Devotion as a one-off maybe because it shuts off Nykthos and their ability to storm off, but it's not as good there. So mainly here for Lotus Field, but it is excellent in that matchup, so I feel like it's worth it. And then finally we've got 2 copies of Culling Ritual, mainly here for the Lurus decks, but just gives us a way to stabilize from behind, specifically against Boros Energy, where they can go very wide early on with, you know, Guide of Souls into Ocelot Pride. If we don't have spot removal to kind of shut that off before it starts getting out of control, then we might struggle to kind of come back from that. So Culling Ritual is excellent there, but it's also just great against, you know, Auras, Mardu Energy, basically any of the Lurus decks. This is phenomenal as well. So that's the deck overall. Like I said, I think Sorin Elender is the best thing to be doing in the format right now, and this particular build feels like it really fixes the majority of issues that I've been having with other Sorin and Elender builds. It's super flexible, you have a ton of interaction, feels like you have a solid game plan against every deck in the format. Obviously not every matchup is favoured, but it feels like you have at least a good game plan, super flexible. If there are any other changes as well, right, if a certain deck crops up, you can just change your interaction suite slightly to counteract that. So I've been really impressed with that deck, and like I said, it's my current front runner to be running in the qualifier. So next up we've got some gameplay so you guys can see the deck in action. I've just got a run that I was playing in the Metagame challenge last weekend. Either way, give me a shout in the comments if you've got any questions about the deck at all. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you on the next one. Big up. Okay, so match 1 here, and we're on the draw. And no one drop, but this hand actually looks pretty decent to me, right? We've got Abrupt Decay as interaction into Necrodominance into Shieldred. Seems pretty good. Obviously, assemble the team. Not doing too much here because we already have Necrodominance and Shieldred. I mean, I guess, again, you know, depending on what the opponent's on. So Deserted Temple will almost certainly be against Lotus Field here. But, you know, we can use assemble the team to find Sorin or Elender if we draw the other one. Or more than likely, we can assemble for a discard spell maybe. Because this is a matchup where our spot removal isn't going to be doing too much. Okay, now we've drawn Sorin, so now we're just going to snap off the assemble here and try and find Elender. And even though we do have Necro and Shelly, because they have Deserted Temple, unless they can just combo off here, which I think is pretty unlikely, right? They'd need exactly Lotus Field, Consign, or Stifle, and then win this turn. Whereas next turn, if we get to untap, we can go Sorin into Elender, and then use Faith's Fetters on the Deserted Temple, which really limits their ability to combo off. Again, they can still do it without Deserted Temple if they find a second one, or if they get a second Lotus Field, but... Okay, so they untap the Lotus Field, presumably they have a Stifle or Consign here. Yeah. So I just got to hope they can't win. They could potentially win from this spot if they've got a really strong setup, right? Because they've got Hidden Strings, you know, that's 5 mana back. They could use pour over the pages here, so... I'm obviously going to make them play it out because they could fizzle here. And I do think we'd have to get pretty unlucky to lose this turn, right? I think it's fairly unlikely for an average draw. Oh, well, they do have pour over the pages. Okay, maybe not. We might just be dead here. But again, we'll obviously make them play it out because it's not deterministic. But yeah, next turn, if we do get to untap, definitely just going to go Sorin plus Elender. Necrodominance just doesn't do enough here, right? presumably if they don't win this turn, they're going to set up to win next turn. So we need to disrupt their ability to combo off. And getting a Lender, Faith's Fetters on the Deserted Temple is our only real way of doing that right now. You know, the only other way I can see us winning from this spot is if they really fizzle and we can get to turn 4 and then just, you know, cast Shieldred. Because Shieldred is insane against their deck, right? So much of their deck involves drawing to spin their wheels. And also, especially game 1, I don't think they have that many answers. Again, I haven't really been keeping up too much with stock lists of Lotus Field or how they've changed recently because it's not a deck that I've been working on much recently. Oh, wow. Okay, they just... I don't know if that was a misclick or maybe they did just fizzle, but we're definitely just going to go Sorin into a Lender here. And then just put Faith's Fetters on the Deserted Temple. Again, they can still, you know, go off with just the Lotus Field here, but it becomes a lot more difficult, right? Because all of their effects untap 2 lands. Most of them are 2 mana, so they're only getting back 1 mana. Really limits their ability to consistently net mana as they're using their spells, basically. Again, they could have another Deserted Temple, though, or they could have, you know, Expedition map into Deserted Temple and they can still go off, but at least we're starting to turn the corner now as well. That's the other great thing about getting a Lender down here. This is 8 damage this turn, and then we'll get another 8/8 presumably, which should mean that we're on a 2-turn clock here. Assuming the opponent doesn't have like a bounce spell or something like that. Okay, so opponent plays an island. Very happy to not see another Deserted Temple, because that feels like they should be, or it would be difficult for them to go off unless they have a way to bounce the Faith's Fetters here. Wow, they just activate Artist Talent and then they go for Consider. Okay, interesting. So, I mean, with this hand, I think I'm just slamming Shelly here. They could... I'm kind of worried about a bounce spell, so I think I'm just going to see what they've got. We could get punished here if they have... Oh, wow. I was going to say if they have a stacked hand. Okay, yeah. This was a huge misplay on my part. Because this is game 1. I don't think Lotus Field generally has many bounce spells. I should just be slamming Shieldred here. Yeah, that was a huge mistake. I think I just went too quickly there. Yeah, because I was thinking we can break expectations and then Abrupt Decay the Artist Talent, and then unless they have a really stacked hand, they shouldn't be able to go off next turn, hopefully. But, you know, they've been working... They've drawn a lot of cards, so we probably could have guessed they had a stacked hand. So yeah, that was a misplay. If we just jam Shieldred here, they obviously don't have a bounce spell. I don't think they run many in the main deck, so... And then I think we've got to save Abrupt Decay for this second breach here. I was originally planning to use the Decay to take out the Artist Talent, but yeah, this was a huge punt on my part. I definitely should have just slammed the Shieldred. Because the Artist Talent's going to be drawing them cards every time they cast something. The pour over the pages, like, they'd be dead within, you know, 2 or 3 spells if we had a Shieldred in play here. So yeah, I think I might have punted this game, especially because they can, you know, if they've got another. They've found the Deserted Temple now, and you know, even though we can kill this first breach, presumably they can just draw until they find a backup one, or they can get Wish to then find another breach. So yeah, this is a game where we probably automatically win if we just slam Shieldred, but I got too cute with the break expectations there. I mean, I'm still going to make them play it out because, you know, they're going to have to presumably cast a lot of spells to try and find another Underworld Breach as a backup, and they could potentially time out. So I'm just going to edit this out. I kind of assume I'm losing here if the opponent plays well. You know, I'd be shocked if they just jam Breach without a way to get a backup somehow. So yeah, I'm just going to edit out, see how far they get. Okay, so here they've got the Breach live. We're definitely going to Abrupt Decay it, but again, I'm pretty sure they have a backup or another Wish that can find them one. So I'm going to let them loot with the Artist Talent first, just so they have fewer information. Well, as in they don't know that the Breach is getting killed when they're making their loot decisions, at least. So we decay the Breach here, but, you know, again, I'd be very surprised if this works. Right, they have a lot of cards in hand. They've also filtered their hand a lot with Artist Talent, so if they don't have another Breach, I'm sure they have a way to find one, right? Yeah, okay, so there's Wish. Presumably they get a second breach. I'm going to make another quick edit here. Again, I'm going to make them play it out here because they have had a pretty long turn. There is a chance they potentially time out, especially if they're not playing that quickly. And, you know, if the game goes best of 3, sometimes the clock can come into it. But I'm going to edit out till the end anyway because I'm pretty sure they're going to be winning this one. Okay, there we go. So somewhat unsurprisingly, we lose this one. That was so annoying, though, because I do think if I just jam the Shieldred there, which is what I was planning to do until I drew the discard spell, we just win there. So that felt like a real punt. But post-sideboard, this matchup improves quite a lot. We can ditch the Fatal Pushes, which do nothing. Damping Sphere is phenomenal in this matchup. It's the main reason I'm running the card in the first place. Pithing Needle can name Deserted Temple. You know, as we saw last game, they do struggle to, you know, consistently combo off without activating Deserted Temple. Then I also like bringing in Duress here as well. Abrupt Decay is more useful than Fatal Push here because of Expedition Map on the play and also Artist Talent. And we saw last game we can use it to kill Breach as well. This hand doesn't really do much. You know, we don't have a set game plan. This hand, on the other hand, though, looks great. Put back the Decay, and then we've got Discard Spell into Necrodominance. Seems pretty good to me, right? And I don't think they really have much that can stop this outside of Leyline of Sanctity, maybe, which not that many builds are running. Okay, snap off the Expedition Map. It's their only turn on play. And, you know, they have Lotus Field, but they don't have... what am I saying? They don't have Deserted Temple, which the Expedition Map would obviously help them get. So it must be a Lorium revealed or a Consider here. Yeah, Lorium revealed. And I guess they're kind of forced to grab a land here because they need... Well, they need at least 2 lands for the Lotus Field. So we get rid of Hidden Strings. Now they're kind of running on empty. And now we get the Necrodominance down. And opponent doesn't apply any pressure to our life total. So I think I'm just going to go for 10 here. You know. And then that basically guarantees that we're going to find something good. I mean, we don't find a Shieldred, which would have been ideal. We don't find Sorin plus a Lender. But we do have Damping Sphere. We do have Pithing Needle. We do have another discard spell. This is quite tricky, though. I wish it would just let me pick 5. It would be so much easier than forcing me to discard 7 here. So we definitely want Damping Sphere. We definitely want one Alenda. I think we want an Assemble the Team to find Sorin. And then we want an untapped land. I don't think... hold on. So I'm just debating whether it's best to keep Thoughtseize here or not. I think we can put Thoughtseize back. We already know they're pretty out of gas here, right? Plus, we have 2 hate cards that can just stop them comboing off anyway. You know, in this matchup, the big weakness of discard spells specifically is that, you know, the opponent can always top deck out of it. And then when they do, we don't really have a great way to stop them comboing off. Whereas Pithing Needle and Damping Sphere, you know, even if they do top deck well, should hopefully stop them comboing off. So definitely going to name Deserted Temple here. And then we'll just jam the Damping Sphere. And then... I'll just go for 3. We are already fairly low on life total. Okay, we found Sorin. Perfect. So that gives us, you know, life gain to keep activating the Necrodominance here. And then we do obviously need to be wary of Damping Sphere making the card that we get off Elenda cost 1 more. But I don't think that should really matter here. So I think we just go for Inspiring Cleric here. We just want to apply as much pressure as possible, close the game out as quickly as possible. And it also gives us some flexibility here with our ability to, you know, sacrifice Inspiring Cleric for the last 3 damage if we need. Okay, interesting. I don't think we need Sorin here. We can put that back. Having a backup Damping Sphere is huge, though, because typically their answers for hate pieces are all single target. Yeah, opponent just scoops it up. So that's kind of unfortunate, because I feel like if we played Shieldred on game 1, this is probably over. I don't think they beat that hand, even if we were on the draw, really. But this matchup feels really good to me, so I'm pretty confident going into game 3, where I think if Lotus Field starts sideboarding into Leyline of Sanctity, then things become trickier because discard spells are a big part of it. But, you know, like we saw there, we've got Damping Sphere, we've got Pithing Needle, we've got Shieldred, which I should have played game 1, and that can kind of solo the game as well. So this hand, I mean, this hand kind of sucks, but we do have turn 1 discard. We do have a lot of good top decks here as well. You know, Assemble the Team is great, Sorin is great, Necrodominance is great, Shieldred is great. So as long as we don't just draw lands, I think we should be good here. I only see 2 cards here. I mean, I think we have to take Pour Over the Pages. If this was a Thoughtseize and those are their only 2 cards, I mean, I think we're still taking Pour Over the Pages anyway, right? Because their hand would be full of lands there. But Break Expectations obviously doesn't see 1 drops, so there is a chance that they just have, you know, Sleight of Hand, Consider, Expedition Map, that sort of thing in hand. I guess another good thing about this hand is that if we do draw more lands, we can just use Boggart Trawler on their graveyard, which does make Breach less good, right? It requires more setup from them. Wow, we do draw another land. Okay, that's kind of rough. I mean, I guess it means that we can now just slam Shieldred if we draw it, but you know, obviously really need anything other than lands here. And again, I think most draws are pretty good. Okay, they do get a Replicating Ring off the Break Expectations, which, you know, does provide them with more mana here. Okay, so they play the Replicating Ring. Oh, okay. Wow, okay. This sucks. At least we can get creature down. At least we can... I mean, exiling 2 cards doesn't feel that high impact here, but... You know, they often do rely on Breach, so we are kind of forcing them to reset in a way. Okay, there's the Lotus Field. Do they have a... Okay, they got Stifle. Yeah, so this was... I mean, I still think this hand is a fine keep on a 6 on the draw. Oh, okay, Pithing Needle's interesting here. So most of the time I'll name Deserted Temple with Pithing Needle because we know they have an Expedition map in play here. I'm tempted to go for that because then that also limits their ability to tutor for Otawara or the Horizon Land if they need to draw a card. Although actually, having said that, they've already got Lotus Field. So the weakness of naming Expedition map here is that if they naturally have or draw a Deserted Temple, then they can just combo off. And and they do. Okay, yeah. I mean, we got punished, but I think it's still a mistake because naming Expedition map with Pithing Needle is really good if they haven't got Lotus Field yet either, because then you're shutting off their ability to tutor either for Lotus Field or Deserted Temple. Because they already have a Lotus Field in play, I'm pretty sure I should just always name Deserted Temple there because that's the only card we really care about, right? The only difference Expedition map could make here is if they do use it to tutor an Otawara when that makes a difference. But it looks like we're both drawing really badly here. They don't have stuff to combo off with, even though they have this setup. And the same sort of thing here. Okay, they do have the Otawara, so they already had the Aura naturally as well. So yeah, I think it was definitely a mistake to not name Deserted Temple with the Needle here, because now we're at risk of them just top decking and comboing off. Whereas if we have Deserted Temple lock, I think the chances of that go down quite a bit. So we're going to Thoughtseize before we Trawler again, just because we want to keep their graveyard as empty as possible because of Underworld Breach. Well, they fragment the Needle. I mean, I didn't think Needle was really doing that much. I guess they can now use Expedition map to tutor for a Horizon Land to draw a card and you know, hope that they combo off. But we might just win off the back of Boggart Trawler beatdown, which is not how I expected not how I expected this matchup to go at all. See what they grab off the map here. Wow, they get a Lotus Field. I'm surprised. Like, surely they must run the or at least one Horizon Land, which gives them another look at comboing off here. Because we don't have any defense against the combo. So this has been such a weird game, but, you know, if we played Shieldred on game 1, there's a good chance it doesn't even get to a game 3. And this matchup has felt really good to me so far as well. So get round 1 down, which is obviously great. Okay, so match 2, we're on the draw again. I think we can keep this one though. We've got, you know, decent interaction here, and again we've got a lot of good top decks. Necro's great, Symbol's great, Sorin's great, Shieldred is decent here as well if we can find another land. So lead on the Thoughtseize here. Oh wow. Okay. I mean, this is what always happens when you play these sorts of events instead of ladder. You are obviously sometimes just going to run into players playing just homebrews. I mean, to be fair, I have lost to Dinosaurs relatively recently, like within the past year, when people make builds around some of the alchemy cards that are pretty good. But, you know, right now it's not good enough, especially if you keep a one-lander on the play. Okay, and opponent just gives us a free win, so obviously would have liked to play it out, but I'll take it. Okay, so match 3 here on the play. And nothing before turn 3, not good enough. This is a pretty painful hand, but I think we probably have to keep it. Just tough to know what to put back here. I mean, I think my instinct is to put back Shieldred, because if we draw a green land, we can then assemble to get Sorin, and then we've already got the Elender there. I guess the other alternative would be maybe trying to use Assemble the Team to find Necrodominance, but You know, with this hand, we're already potentially taking 4 off Thoughtseize, maybe 6 off the Boggart Trawlers if we have to play both untapped, which doesn't really do that well into Necrodominance. So I think I'm going to put back the Shieldred here. But yeah, it is a little bit rough taking 5 on turn 1. Oh wow, okay, so it looks like another homebrew here. Looks like maybe Elves mixed with top end, so they're trying to ramp into the Ugins and stuff. Obviously not a top tier deck, but from my experience in the Metagame Challenge, you're likely to run into these sorts of decks in the first few rounds, but typically as you get further along, you'll usually get matched against more meta decks. So here, definitely going to lead on Thoughtseize, see what they have. Okay, they do have another 2-drop, so we take out the War Master, and then I think we do have to play the Boggart Trawler untapped, so we've dealt ourselves 10 damage here, which isn't great, but again, I don't think this matchup, I don't think it'll matter that much in this matchup. Okay, so they play Llanowar Elves, definitely going to take that out. We're more worried about the 6-mana Ugin here than we are about the Clan Caller. Oh wow, not like this. They might actually get to cast their Ugin at this point if we don't draw anything relevant here. But I mean, a green land is gas. We can just assemble for Sorin and then hopefully go for Elenda the following turn. Okay, perfect. That's great. We don't need to use Abrupt Decay here, so just going to slam off Assemble. And we did find Sorin, thankfully. If we didn't find Sorin, then we might be in trouble because Necrodominance at 9, especially when we have to take another 1 off the Llanowar Waste here, is a little bit rough. And this kind of match does maybe highlight why you might want to trim on the Boggart Trawlers, potentially. I've still found 4 to be fine, but there are going to be occasional matches like this where you might be forced to go Bojuka Bog into Thoughtseize, and especially against decks running Goblin Bombardment, you know, Mardu sacrifices a lot of great reach because of Marionette Apprentice as well. That could end up losing you some games, but having said that, I've also found... what am I saying? Oh, so yeah, I found Boggart Trawler to be really good to hardcast, especially because I want to be running 25 lands in this deck. So having just a decent hardcast card that can get on the board and exile the graveyard, which is very relevant right now in a number of matchups, does feel pretty good. So if I do end up running into more aggressive decks or more bombardment decks, and the life loss off Boggart Trawler is an issue, then I will. But so far, you know, I've played a lot of matches with this deck and it hasn't really come up at all so far because we have so much life gain, right? We've got Sorin Elenda, we've got Shieldred. You know, as we see here, we're gaining 8 life back, so if we did have Necrodominance, we'd be completely fine. And then here, definitely going to use the Abrupt Decay on the Llanowar Elves, just because we don't want them to either cast the Ugin or start activating the Clan Caller. If they miss a land drop here, they can't activate the Clan Caller either. I mean, I'm pretty sure they're just dead here anyway, right? We've got Sorin 8/8 and a 4/4 and... Sorry, Elenda 8/8 and a 4/4 and Sorin still active with another one in hand, so... I'd be pretty surprised if we end up losing this one. Okay, Marwyn can potentially get them up to their Planeswalkers, but... I think we should just be good here, for the most part. So we could attack first and maybe save the Sorin activation in case we can Helix for the win, but... I think that's pretty unlikely with our attackers here, right? They're forced to block the 8/8. And even if they let 8 damage through, you know, the Helix mode isn't really going to matter. And at least we now have Break Expectations, so we can now get rid of the 6-mana Ugin, and they're just far enough away from 8-mana Ugin where it shouldn't really matter here. And I don't think there's anything they can get off the spellbook that would save them here either. Best top decks for the sort of deck they're running. I mean, maybe if they have like Collected Company into 2 War Masters or something, then Marwyn becomes really big, and then they can potentially ramp into an Ugin or something. Yeah, okay, they just play the weapon rack. This is over. Even if they block with both creatures, we still win. And we draw a Thoughtseize for the Ugin as well. So, take down game 1. Again, opponent's on kind of a brew, right? And there are viable ramp decks right now. You know, Team of Devotion, Simic Eldrazi, both pretty good. Again, I'm not sure I would run them personally because I think they have pretty polarizing matchups, which I don't love at the moment. But they are strong decks for sure. So, I mean, Boseiju is annoying. I've been tempted to cut it for a black land specifically because of situations like this. But having said that, we are running 25 lands, 24 of which are black. So, I think this is the first time it's come up for me so far where I might have to play a land like Besaidu on green. And having said that, that is also an issue with the pathways as well, right? If you're forced to play your pathway on green, then it cuts you off Necrodominance on turn 3. But again, I don't think it matters too much. One other thing as well is I have been seeing like a mono white land destruction deck where they run 4 white Orchid Phantom and Field of Ruin and Ghost Quarter, in addition to, you know, hate cards like Containment Priest to specifically target the Sorin decks. Wow, Nissa. Haven't seen that card in ages. So definitely take the Nissa here. And then we'll decay the War Master. I think I'm going to do that now just in case they play, you know, if they draw like a Nykthos off the top, there's a chance that they could activate it before I can kill it. And I'm sure that's what I'm going to kill, so I might as well do it preemptively anyway. So here we're in a bit of a rough spot though. If we don't, you know, if we draw another Elender, Necro or Shieldred, then all we have here is a discard spell. But if we can land, you know, if we can draw any other untapped land here and slam Shieldred, I think that's just going to be good enough to stabilize. Although they do have the 50 feet of rope. That deals 5 damage, right? Oh, wow. Okay, just got to ship it back. That's pretty unfortunate. But yeah, sorry, as I was saying, there is a mono-white land destruction deck that I have seen. I'm not sure... Oh, wow, what a top deck. I'm not sure how much I really need to respect it right now, but as a 2-color deck that primarily wants to be playing black, we can very easily afford to run more basics, or basic swamps anyway. Yeah, okay, just scoop up, go to game 3 here. So I do think there's, you know, I have been considering cutting Besaidu and, you know, maybe another dual or utility land just to run a couple of extra basics. I think if I face it more often in the metagame challenge and I see other players facing it as well, then I'll respect it more and swap to swamps, which then should, you know, completely mitigate the chances of that sort of thing happening. Again, if you don't have a green source and you do have a pathway, then you kind of are forced in that situation to play it on green, which cuts you off the turn 3 Necrodominance, but, you know, outside of that, I think it's fine. So here we got push into assemble into Necrodominance. If we draw Sorin or Elender, sorry, if we draw Sorin or Elender, we can obviously use assemble the team to try and find the other part. If we don't, then I think you would either get shielded for the Necrodominance or another removal spell potentially. Okay, we do find a Elender, so I think we're just trying to find Sorin now then. We do find the Sorin. They've played Utopia Sprawl as well, so we can go Sorin, Elender, invoke the Divine Utopia Sprawl, Necrodominance or push after that, and then we're just off to the races, I think. There's not too much they can do. I mean, again, they do have the Planeswalkers, but, you know, they don't have enough ramp to get to them quickly enough here, I don't think. Especially when we take out the Sprawl here, which we have seen a number of Planeswalkers. It really wouldn't surprise me if they had Kiora, Behemoth Beckoner, at which point taking down that Utopia Sprawl is really key, because that is a way that they can ramp really quickly if they start untapping the land with Utopia Sprawl on it. Okay, Decay's nice here. So I think we obviously give the 4/4 lifelink here, and I'm going to attack first. They could very well have Collector's Company here, although the opponent doesn't have priority, so they're maybe just stuck with a bunch of top end in hand they can't cast. So for that reason, definitely going to be taking out the Llanowar Elves here. Just want to cut them off ramp. And then I don't think there's a real urgency to take out the Clan Caller here. You know, we could obviously decay, but especially with 28 life, we can just, you know, slam the Necrodominance. I only draw 5, but we could probably draw 10 there, honestly. Maybe that was a misplay. So I think we only really need 1 land here. Maybe we can just take out both Necrodominances, but I like keeping a second one just in case they have an answer. Okay, they do have another Llanowar Elves. So I presume, you know, they probably have like a 6-mana Ugin in hand, but at this point I think it's just too slow to really matter. Plus we have a discard spell to find out here. Yeah, okay, they do have the 6-mana Ugin, we can get rid of that. And opponent just keeps it up, so we got there nice. So this coming round is a bit of a weird one, because basically the opponent was just playing pretty slowly. I think they ended with 8 minutes and I had nearly 20 by the end of it. So what I've had to do for this one is basically just add commentary after the fact, like speed up the match by 2.5 times speed, or, you know, this round would have lasted like 45 minutes. So what I've basically done is just speed up the video 2.5 times and just I've added commentary post, right? Obviously, the audio that I recorded originally would just be completely messed up because I'm having to speed it up. and it would take me so long to edit all of the pauses out as well. So this is what I'm just going to have to do for this round, just speeding it up. But this hand, I mean, it is very risky. It's very land heavy, but on the play, I think we can keep it because we've just got a turn 3 Sorin here. So get to slam it here. And then I think, yeah, we go for the Inspiring Cleric, which is nice because then that just gives us an out to any creatures they play, right? If they play Emperor of Bones, for example, it's really nice. So they do have a Sorin Elender of their own. I was definitely expecting to put Faith's Fetters on the Saint Elender here, but I believe they put it on the Sorin instead, which I'm actually pretty happy about. Obviously, not getting access to Sorin is kind of rough here, but, you know, I feel like still being able to attack and block with Elender is a much bigger deal at this point. So here I think I'm just figuring out whether it's best to go for Thoughtseize plus Takenuma or Thoughtseize plus Hive of the Eye Tyrant. Here, the opponent's got a pretty good hand. I think, you know, we're in a situation where it doesn't really matter what we take outside of the Overlord because they can just get whatever we take back with the Overlord. So I think we just take one of the Overlords, but yeah, that hand's pretty much Thoughtseize proof, which is kind of rough. So they do plus on the token here, and we could just let it through, but I think I'm happy to make the trade. Obviously, they get an extra 4/4 here, but you know, I don't want them to start building up a board and also take damage unnecessarily. So they Dollmaker the Elender here, which then enables them to use Faith's Fetters on the Elender now, which is pretty rough. But they end up going for Inspiring Cleric. I forgot about that, which is kind of a surprise, because I just feel like having my own Elender here is shutting them off attacking. Although having said that, maybe sacrificing the 4/4 wasn't a great, or trading the 4/4 wasn't great last turn, because now they can attack with the Elender potentially, whereas, you know, holding back the 4/4 does mean that we could double block their Elender, but the fact they blinked it with the Dollmaker kind of mitigates that, because now they can activate the Dollmaker to give the Elender indestructible if they did choose to attack. So I don't think it makes too much of a difference here. But we do get Necrodominance down, and we also now have enough lands where we can go assemble the team into Shieldred. Unfortunately, the opponent does have a Juggernaut Peddler, but we still get, you know, a creature down off the Juggernaut Peddler, and we still have a decent amount of life here as well, so we can start drawing. And we find an Abrupt Decay, which we can use to take out the Sorin. So now they can't start, you know, snowballing as hard. They can't give their 8/8's lifelink, although, you know, we do obviously know they have another Sorin which they could play here. But I think at this point, we're just trying to save as much damage as possible. We're trying to soak up as much damage as possible this turn, because if we can resolve the Shieldred, then we're in a great spot, right? Then we can start gaining a bunch of life. So they just attack with the 8/8's here, which is huge. So I double block here, which does take 4 damage, right? Because we gain 4 back off the Elender, and we lose the Elender. They do blink the Peddler, which then enables them to take one of the Shieldreds, but we have a second one. Looking back at this now, I definitely do see an argument to just blocking one of each, but then we take a huge amount of damage next turn, so they end up taking the Elender instead of the Shieldred there, which is completely fine. Now we just jam the Shieldred, jam the Boggart Trawler, and then, since the opponent doesn't have any way to deal damage to us at instant speed, we can just pay 6 here, completely refuel our hands, go up to 13, and then still don't have Sorin Elender yet, but we do have assembled the team into Sorin, which can hopefully find it. And the opponent doesn't have great attacks here, really. I mean, I guess they've still got both of the Dollmaker activations here, which they can use to protect both the Elender and the 8/8 here, which is a little bit of a concern. So they have a Dollmaker to blink the Overlord, gets them a Felia back, and then they still have a mana spare here that they can use to play the Sorin if they wanted to give the, you know, lifelink to the 8/8 again, keep that train rolling. But I still feel we're not in a terrible spot, right? If they attack with everything, well, if they play anything else, they can't activate Dollmaker here, which they do. They play the Sorin, which is huge for us, right? So now they attack him with the 8/8 only. So this is absolutely huge. We just want to take as little damage here as possible. I would have been much more scared if the opponent just attacked with everything there. So we assemble the team trying to find a Elender here. We don't find it, unfortunately, which kind of sucks. But we do find extra interaction, so I think just going for the Abrupt Decay makes the most sense here. We could also use Sorin to give the shielded lifelink, but we really want the shielded to survive here. So I think we just decay the Sorin, ship it back, pay 12, completely refuel our hand, completely refuel our life total, and then we can fire off a couple of these instant speed removal spells just so we don't waste these extra cards, because obviously we're going to have to discard down to 5. And yeah, it would be so, like, it'd be such a good quality of life upgrade if they let you pick 5 rather than like discarding 8 in situations like that. But still in a pretty good position, even though the opponent's like way ahead on board, right? We're still at 25. We have Sorin Elenders to go next turn. We've got Thoughtseize ready in case they're holding on to something else to try and interrupt what we're trying to do. Although we obviously know what's in their hand here, but so they attack with both here. Obviously, we're going to block this Shieldred on the Elender here. And the really nice thing about that is it does force one of the Dollmaker activations here. Like, the opponent does have a pretty good setup here where they've got 2 really powerful creatures that they have 3 different activations to give Indestructible to, which is a bit of a concern. But, you know, we've got Sorin plus Elender here. We've got Thoughtseize to get rid of probably the Emperor of Bones here, I'd have to imagine. Wow, they flash in. Okay, so now they don't have the Dollmaker activation anymore. That is huge. Now we can go Sorin Elender, and now we can kill the Elender with Invoke the Divine. They don't have the Dollmaker up to protect it anymore. And then we can just draw a bunch of cards off the Necrodominance. Maybe I should have drawn more there looking back on it. Because we have the Shieldred, right? We're not exactly... Oh, I guess we are fairly close to decking out. We've only got 13 cards left in the deck, so that'll probably be why. But yeah, now I feel like we're in a pretty good spot here. They triple attack Sorin, but we've got a backup one in hand, so we can just block however we wish here. Okay, they do assemble Sorin Elender of their own, which is obviously a concern. And I expect them to activate Dollmaker here, so I like blocking the Dollmaker with Shieldred, right? So now they go Sorin Elender of their own. They can take out the Necrodominance here, potentially. But, you know, I still feel like we're in a reasonable spot. Yeah, they invoke the Divine, the Necrodominance, but now we start drawing again, so that's not necessarily the end of the world here, really. Having said that, they do have the bigger board. They do have Sorin Elender of their own. But again, I don't think they really have great attacks here, to be honest. You know, Sorin Elender does start snowballing, but they don't have an 8/8 yet, right? So they can't start snowballing really quickly with the Sorin pluses. We have our own Sorin here as well, so... And we don't necessarily need to attack to keep pumping out tokens with the Elender here either, because we're gaining 2 every turn off the Shieldred. So even if we don't attack, we're guaranteed to get at least a 2/2 here. So they give Overlord lifelink, and they attack 4 into Sorin here, which, you know, again, we have a backup Sorin, and it's at 5 loyalty, so, you know, we're pretty flexible with how we block here. And now I believe that's the last Dollmaker activation. So now we can actually start killing stuff like Overlord and their tokens here, which is pretty nice. So lead on Thoughtseize, snap off the Jarsaw, break expectations away the Sorin. Maybe I should let them break expectations first, actually, just to see what they hit. Especially because we didn't know what their other card was, actually. That's because, you know, then we could have at least Thoughtseized away the break expectations card if we really wanted. Interesting that I chose not to use Abrupt Decay on Sorin, though. That feels like a bit of a mistake to me. I don't know exactly what I'm holding the Decay for here, really. So that was maybe a punt on my part. But maybe I feel like I can beat Sorin anyway here. And so maybe I'm thinking, okay, I want to hold Abrupt Decay to kill like a Jarsaw or something in case they draw that. So I think I remember in this instance, the opponent's mousing over Dollmaker. Oh, okay, save the Abrupt Decay to kill the token with the Sorin. I guess that also makes a bit of sense, but, you know, if we'd taken out the Sorin, we wouldn't have had to kill that token necessarily anyway. So yeah, looking back on it, I'm not sure I love using the Abrupt Decay there. I probably should have just used it to take out their Sorin. But now at this point, I remember in the game, I believe we both have the same number of cards in deck, but the opponent's drawing first. So as things stand, as long as I don't draw any cards or get any cards milled, the opponent should deck out before me. And it is a board stall here, right? The opponent doesn't really have a great way to break through. But yeah, looking back at this again, I definitely should have used Abrupt Decay to take out their Sorin. So now we can plus on the Juggernaut. Don't really have great blockers. Obviously, they could block with the 0/1 and sacrifice it to deny us the life gain. And then I also like holding onto the Overgrown Tomb here, just bluff a piece of interaction, right? The opponent knows we've got a shielded, but they don't know what the other card is, so it might force them to, respect more stuff, if that makes sense. So yeah, looking back on this, definitely a misplay not to Abrupt Decay the Sorin. Thankfully, we just happened to draw another one though, which is huge. And then attack the Sorin first to not give away that we have a removal spell for it. Obviously, now they can do the denying us of the life gain thing, but we've still gained 2 life off the Shieldred trigger, so we still get to pump out tokens every turn, even without attacking. So this is kind of another nice synergy between Shieldred and Saint Elender that, it doesn't come up that often, but it is nice when it happens. Okay, interesting. So now we got Boseiju, which is nice. We can start attacking with the 7/7. So this was a game that we've been, behind on board pretty much the entire thing. And now we're, ahead on cards in deck where we have the inevitability somewhat here. So now they thought seize away the Shieldred. We'll break expectations. I think I was trying to submit 0 there because we didn't really care about Peddler at all, but I don't think there's anything that we really care too much about here either. So now we can attack with the 7/7. Could attack with the Elender, but they have enough creatures to like gang up on it. And I think we're winning with the status quo as it is at the moment. So we don't want to risk losing our Elender here unnecessarily. So they play the Magistrate's Scepter. We don't really need to worry about that. Necrodominance is also interesting because if this does come to decking out, we can potentially just play the Necro when our deck is empty and then, the opponent will deck out. It's a way to stop us drawing the last card, basically. So they sack the Elender here, which is huge for us, right? And then we have the answer for the Magistrate's Scepter. They do hardcast the Elender, though, so that's obviously why they were happy to block with it last turn. And then they can face fetters the Sorin, but we have Boseiju to answer it. So we Boseiju away the face fetters. Now we can keep using the Sorin here. Boggart Troll is a nice one to be able to cast, but we're definitely going to do it main phase 2 in case they choose to block with anything else, just to get rid of an extra card from their graveyard. And I'm also holding up Hive of the Eye Tyrant here as an extra blocker if we need, and an extra attacker. So yeah, opponent finally scoops it up. Sideboarding here, go for the Surgicals in, and then just debating what the best cuts are. Like Fatal Push does have some good targets like Emperor of Bones, but outside of and Failure as well, I guess. But outside of that, most of their threats are pretty Fatal Push resistant. I do like having Abrupt Decay though, because it can, it gives us more flexibility. It can answer any hate cards the opponent brings in against us as well. So anyway, just gonna edit out the rest of sideboarding. We'll get into game 2. Okay, so going into game 2 here, we're obviously on the draw. And this hand I think we can keep, right? Obviously, we really don't want them to take Boggart Trawler here, which they do lead on a discard spell. And I'm super surprised they don't take the Boggart Trawler. Like that, I was really worried they would do that. I mean, thankfully we did draw another land, so they could get punished for it. And because I am concerned about discard spells, I am just going to slam the Paducah Bog here. Because we do, we've got a curve out here, right? We've got assemble the team, hopefully find Sorin into a lender. So we need the 3rd land here, really. So they did get a Ginger Brute, which is one of the best cards they can get off it. But we can assemble the team for Sorin, and if they do go for Jarsil here, we can Surgical the Break Expectations to, ensure that we can go off. And I also just end up going through their deck just to see what, how they've sideboarded, if they've got any other threats that we're not aware of. So we get rid of the Break Expectations, and now we can just slam Sorin into a lender, and then... Interesting that I chose Inspiring Cleric here. rather than, we could have obviously used Invoke the Divine on Gingerbrute, because now they can give Gingerbrute unblockable. Obviously they make a punt here, they should have activated the Gingerbrute first. But yeah, looking back on it, maybe I'm supposed to Invoke the Divine. They can't crack it in response to deny us the life gain, and yeah, opponent just scoops it up, so we end up getting there. Nice. Okay, so we're on the play here, and can't keep a one-lander, unfortunately. Although, actually, I don't know. I mean, if we find a second land, this hand is gas. I'm going to risk it, because then we also have Thoughtseize on 1. We are running a 25 land deck, so chances of finding at least the second one is pretty high. Wow, okay, opponent kept a one-lander as well. Interesting. So they've got a stacked hand, especially if they can draw a second land here, but you know, we're planning, if we draw a second land, which we kind of need to here, really, then we really don't want to be giving them an extra card, especially when they're missing out on lands. Okay, 6. So now we found it. Now this is a spot where I actually don't mind using a symbol to find another land. And I'm going to go with Blooming Marsh, because then it gets a land that's going to be entering tap later in the game. But I think there's maybe an argument for getting Takenuma there, just because if we draw another land, then we have, you know, we have a utility land that we can use potentially, but I think that's, you know, a pretty small difference. So we could Fatal Push Decay and then use Sorin next turn, because Guide of Souls can potentially, you know, if they find another land, they can go Ajani, give one of their creatures flying and kill the Sorin here. But I think just getting a Linda down as early as possible is almost always the correct play, especially in a matchup like this where they don't have any way to go over the top of us, really. Like, obviously they do have Guide of Souls and Bombardment, but they don't have an infinite combo or anything. Okay, so opponent got punished there for the one-lander and we didn't, but we are running a 25-land deck, whereas they're more likely on like 22-ish, so, you know, statistically not that unlikely. So discard spells aren't that great against them here because they have so many just generically powerful cards. So I'm going to be trimming the discard spells here for Stone of Iraq, Pithing Needle, and Cut Down, and we've got just a lot of good interaction to keep them off in the early game. You know, we've got Needle to shut off Bombardment. We've got Stone of Iraq to shut off their death triggers. Now, it does look like they're on just Boros rather than Mardu, so they don't have as many death triggers, unless they're on Flage as well, potentially. Actually, I can't remember if they were on Lurus or not. I guess we'll find out in a second. But if they're on Gigantha rather than Lurus, then they could have Flage that Stone of Iraq shuts off as well. Not to mention Ajani is obviously just the main one. And I mean, if maybe we just didn't see any black, there's a chance that maybe a Marionette Princess. Okay, so they were on Lurus, so unlikely to be on Flage, but I still think Stone of Iraq shutting off Ajani is big, because that is one of their main ways that they can go over the top of a lender, potentially anyway. So this hand obviously, oh wow, I was going to say obviously we're missing either a lender or a Necrodominance or a Shieldred, but happen to draw on there, which is obviously great. No one drop from the opponent is obviously huge. And then we'll see what they've got here. I think we're basically just going to snap off a removal spell against anything, really. Okay, so they do have Ajani. I think we just take out the Ajani itself here. Obviously, the token has more power, but there's, you know, you just open up yourself to so many more potential lines where, you know, they can cast a second Ajani and flip the first one, or, you know, cast another Ajani and then they've got... Oh, sorry, not another Ajani. Cast an Ocelot Pride and then they've got another way to flip it as well. Well, they don't cast anything here, so interesting. So this makes me think they must have Containment Priest. So I'm just going to ship it back here. We obviously could have used Abrupt Decay to take out the 2-1, but I honestly don't really care about the 2-1 at this point. Interesting they chose not to flash in Containment Priest if that is what they have here. I would expect them to have flashed it in end of last turn. Wow, they Surgical Cut Down. So they must have a very interactive heavy hand. Again, I'm pretty sure if the opponent has Containment Priest, they probably flash it in there. Unless their hand is just all instant speed interaction, right? If they have just a bunch of interaction, then I could see holding on to Containment Priest. Especially because we haven't committed anything to the board, right? The opponent could probably tell that we have quite an interactive heavy hand as well. But yeah, that seems like a horrible use of Surgical, unless the opponent just needs information. If the opponent needs information, that makes sense. At this point, I think we can decay the 2-1, because now next turn we can go Boggart Trawler untapped, or another land if we draw it, which we do. Now we can save the Boggart Trawler. But now we can go Sorin minus, and if they do have Containment Priest, we have Fatal Push to kill it. And they don't have enough mana for 2 of them here, which is really nice. So Well, they don't have Containment Priest. Okay, I'm expecting a Fragment Reality then. They must have, you know, from how they've played, they must just have an interactive heavy hand. It's the only thing that makes sense. So here I'm going to go for Inspiring Cleric, just because if they do have Fragment, we still get a creature on the board that can block. It's still very nice with Sorin if Sorin survives, right, if they are relying on Fragment here. Okay, really hope we hit a Shieldred. That would be huge. Wow, okay, we do. Sick, sick. So that is massive. Now we get Inspiring Cleric down. Now we have a Shieldred down as well, which, you know, is difficult for them to deal with. Fragment Reality is probably their only answer, really, outside of maybe Bombardment. Or I guess, you know, Ajani as well, obviously. But if they Fragment Reality the Shieldred, we get a Boggart Trawler. So yeah, I feel pretty good about this spot now. So they got Stadium Headliner. I'm trying to think what else the rest of their hand could be. It must be instant speed. Oh, just interaction in general. Okay. There's Static Prison, so presumably that takes out Shieldred. Okay, yeah, that was a clean way for them to answer it. Although, you know, 2 turns, they don't have a Guide of Souls, so... And we also have Abrupt Decay here. Okay, so... I think we just buff the Cleric and just go... Abrupt Decay, Boggart Trawler. I think it makes sense to Abrupt Decay now, so that we deal them damage off the Shieldred upkeep trigger. I mean, we could have obviously waited to use Decay till their upkeep, but it doesn't really make much of a difference, I don't think. You know, there's no way they're running protection for Static Prison, so... Okay, there is the Ocelot Pride. And Static Prison again, but thankfully we have Inspiring Cleric that we can use. Oh wow, okay, that's a sick draw. But now, yeah, we can sacrifice the Inspiring Cleric to take out the Ocelot Pride, because that is a card that will snowball if we don't answer it. And then obviously drawing Necrodominance here is huge. Wow, getting a bit of lag. But yeah, now we can attack in, just completely refuel. Obviously that was a sick top deck, but even without that I still feel like we're in a good spot. Now we can draw 7, put back a couple of lands. Okay, now I'm really getting lag. What's going on? Okay, opponent just scoots it up. So yeah, we got there. Nice. That felt pretty good. Okay, so we're going second tier. And yeah, this hand looks great, right? We got Expectations on 1, nothing on 2 yet, but obviously on the draw we've got 2 looks at a 2-drop. And then we got Sorin Elender on turn 3. So we'll lead on Break Expectations here, we'll see what they're on. Oh no, okay, so this is the land destruction deck. So this is a deck I've seen a few times recently, but I just wasn't sure how much to respect it. Now that I've seen it again, I think it's enough times now where I'm going to have to make a tweak to the mana base. It's such a simple tweak to make, just to trim a few utility lands to run. I think 3 basics is probably safe, but it just turns this matchup, well, it just makes this matchup so much easier. You know, a 2-color deck that needs a ton of black lands as well. Running swamps is so free. All you lose out on really is a couple of utility lands, which does, you know, affect consistency in other matchups. But the difference it makes in this matchup specifically is so big that after this run in the Metagame Challenge, I'm definitely going to go up to at least 3 basics, I think. You know, just trying to think what the best utility lands are to cut. Beseiju being green when we're running a triple black card has been an issue a few times. Plus, we're on 4 Abrupt Decay in the main deck, so, you know, having that as a way to kill artifacts and enchantments is not ideal. And having thought about it more, you know, I picked the Even Interrupter because it can potentially stop Sorin, but I think I probably should have taken the White Orchid Phantom here with just a basic, right? Because White Orchid Phantom is just going to be a Stone Rain. You know, copies 2 and 3 are just going to be Stone Rain for 2 mana here, so I think I'm supposed, even though, you know, leaving them with an Even Interrupter when we're trying to resolve Sorin isn't exactly ideal, I think since we're only running a single basic, it's probably best just to take out the White Orchid Phantom, especially because, you know, if they miss their 3rd land drop, all we need here is just 1 land, and we can just go Sorin on 3, so I will push one of the Phantoms now, just to be mana efficient. We do find another land, so see here, had we taken this 3rd White Orchid Phantom instead of Even Interrupter, we could potentially win this game because they're missing land drops. I mean, there's obviously a chance they don't run out the 3rd White Orchid Phantom if the first one doesn't kill, but yeah, if they miss a 3rd land drop here, then Okay, they did have the third land, so I don't think it makes too much of a difference that we took the Even Interrupter instead. And we're still in an okay position here, right? If we can draw a third land, we're fine. Yeah, unfortunately we don't though. So yeah, I don't know, it's tough. I think taking the... to be honest, I think since White Orchid Phantom is basically just a Stone Rain for 2 mana, I think we should prioritise taking that over the Interrupter, but... Either way, I think, this is going to be a tough matchup. They're basically built to punish 3-colour and Sorin decks. Well, obviously they do have other cards that are good across the board as well, but that's kind of the main reason to run this, and they've got Field of Ruin instead. Kind of weird seeing Field of Ruin when they need double white, but, kind of makes sense. So this matchup... I mean, sideboarding is kind of tricky. I don't know. We've seen main deck Containment Priest, so I think I want Cut Down as just more answers to that, really. Maybe Culling Ritual as well. And then we'd probably trim on Break Expectations. Like, Thoughtseize is still good, but, they are essentially a mid-range deck, or kind of like a Hate Bears mid-range deck at the end of the day, so I think Spot Removal is probably more useful than Discard Spells. And obviously they're trying to go wide as well, so Culling Ritual can punish them for overextending, but obviously they are running 3 drops. We saw Even Interrupter, they're not on Lurrus, so we'll have to see. If we see more of the deck and they are running more 3 drops, then maybe Culling Ritual isn't as good as a Break Expectations, for example, but I'm just going to run like this and see how it does. Okay, so going into game 2 here, obviously being on the play is a big advantage. And to be honest, we obviously saw, they'd probably run 4 White Orchid Phantom and Field of Ruin and Ghost Quarter, but, if they don't draw White Orchid Phantom early on, then the lack of basics isn't too much of an issue. Okay, I think we just take the White Orchid Phantom here. White Orchid Phantom plus Failure is brutal. They don't have anything else they can really use with Failure here. They do have Reprieve, though. So this hand was a little bit risky, but we do have early interaction. We do have a lot of potentially good draws as well, right? Now we can just hardcast Shieldred next turn. I mean, obviously they have Reprieve, but there's a chance they might tap out potentially if they do have a powerful 3-drop, at which point we can just jam the Shieldred. If they do pass back with Reprieve open, then I'm not sure it's worth just jamming it. Oh, okay, wow. They just jam a Clarion Conqueror. I mean, I guess that makes sense because it does shut off Sorin, right? But, now we can just jam Shieldred. I very much doubt they have an answer outside of Fragment Reality, at which point we still get the Boggart Trawler. So I feel pretty good about this spot. I very much doubt they're going to be able to race a Shieldred. And yeah, trying to think what answers they could possibly be running. Obviously, Fragment, I'd be shocked if they're not running that as a 4 of. That's not a clean answer, though. And then, I don't know if they'd be on Skyclave Apparition. Maybe if they're running Failure, they could be, maybe. But even then, we've got Fatal Push. Wow, okay, nice. So they Demolition Field now, which is actually pretty nice, because that triggers Revolt for us. So now we can Fatal Push the Clarion Conqueror, which then makes Sorin a good top deck. So we'll see if they attack here. They might. At which point I think... Okay, no, they don't. I don't know if it's really worth using the push on the Conqueror now, though. I might just hold on to it because I think there's a pretty good chance they might flash in Containment Priest. Although, having said that, I think it's probably more important to kill the Clarion Conqueror, but, it doesn't feel like we're under that much pressure, really. So I'm just going to ship it back, save the Fatal Push for something else. If they do have, like, a Skyclave Apparition or something, using it, getting a 4/4, maybe eating the Containment Priest in combat seems worth it. So even though Clarion Conqueror does, killing Clarion Conqueror is good for our top decks here, I feel like we're in a winning position, so it makes more sense to me to just hold Fatal Push for something else that is actually impactful, that can potentially race the Shieldred. Because here, right, Sorin is dead either way, right? If we kill the Conqueror, Containment Priest shuts it off and vice versa, so I'm kind of glad we held on to the push here. So they Field of Ruin, bit unfortunate because now we can't fire up the Hive if we wanted to, but we've still got enough mana for basically everything else that we could draw here. And also holding Fatal Push is pretty nice here because if they do decide to try and double block the Shieldred, which is a possibility, then we can take it out. But now they're starting to attack with the Conqueror. I think I'm just going to fatal push here, right? Shuts off their defensive options. Okay, they also got Enduring Innocence, sure. Okay, another land isn't great, but it does enable us to just fire up the Hive here, which is nice. So we'll attack with both, just apply maximum pressure. I don't think it really matters what we exile here. I'll take Failure in case they are running some way to rebuy stuff, because that seems like the highest impact card. Wow, they're double blocking here. I mean, I'm so happy to see that. With 2 Elenders in hand, now Sorin is actually a good top deck. I mean, obviously they've got Reprieve, but, you know, deals them 2 damage off the Shieldred here, so kind of a weird game, but, you know, the opponent is running a very specific deck targeted at the metagame, if that makes sense. So, you know, when I'm playing something that's kind of unexpected like Shieldred, that can just sometimes solo the game. Okay, Thoughtseize is interesting. We could obviously not pay the one on Sentinel here to make them take an extra 2, but that seems super risky, right? If they draw Fragment, that would be awful. So I think we just pay the 1 here. See if they decide to reprieve the Thoughtseize or not. Doesn't really feel worth it to me, because if they draw a land, then they take 2 off the Shieldred, and if they draw a non-land, we just take it with the Thoughtseize anyway, so, you know, best case scenario happened there, and it wasn't even that good for them. I think they're better off just letting the reprieve go there. I mean, regardless, they're kind of dead next turn anyway. They would need exactly Fragment Reality, at which point we get Boggart Trawler anyway. You know, wipe out the Containment Priest. So, yeah, I think we should be good here. We'll see, though. So, Demolition Field of land. And yeah, you can also see how much better this matchup would be if we just had 3 basics in the deck, which is a very minor swap, so I'm definitely going to be doing that. Okay, we draw Abrupt Decay, but they've just taken out already green source, so I think we just got to attack. I think opponent's just screwed regardless here, right? Yeah. So take down game 2. Game 3 with just a single basic in the deck is going to be tough, I think. Well, it depends on what they draw, right? If they don't have, you know, multiple White Orchid Phantoms, I think we should be alright. And like I said, definitely going to make the change to just run 3 basics in the main deck. Such a minor tweak. It doesn't really affect the consistency of the mana base at all, really. And just makes this matchup so much better. Okay, so we're obviously going second here, which obviously isn't ideal, but as long as they don't have, you know, double White Orchid Phantom, I think we should be good here. And this is a pretty good hand, right? 2 pieces of interaction into Necrodominance, and they're not running black, so they can't really discard it. So just really the land destruction that we have to worry about early on. And we have 4 lands now as well, so even then I'm not sure that's that great. Wow, nothing on 1 or 2 here, so they must have interaction. It must be like a Reprieve Interrupter heavy hand, maybe. Okay, they ship it back. I mean, I'm kind of tempted to just run out the Boggart Trawler, but I don't, you know, if they've got Aven Interrupters or Reprieves, I don't want them to get value off them. Okay, there's a White Orchid Phantom. Thankfully we didn't draw the basic either. That would have been a disaster. And then I think I'm tempted to decay here just because it's more mana efficient. And also if we go 3-drop, we can go 3-drop and have Fatal Push open next turn. So we can still double spell it. Although, I don't know, it feels a waste. Right, decay being able to take out non-creatures does seem relevant here. And then I think I'll just jam Necro here, right? If they have Reprieve, then we can just recast it next turn. If they don't, then we're pretty good here. And we still have Fatal Push mana up, so it's not like this is our entire turn. So it must be Reprieve they have here, right? There's nothing else I can really think of. Yeah, they Reprieve the Necrodominance. And then we've still got mana up here if we need it. We've still got lands as well, so we're not as worried about the land destruction effects at the moment anyway. Okay, there's Enduring Innocence, which is interesting. Which we can wipe out here, right? We can push if we can trigger Revolt and then use Abrupt Decay to take out the enchantment. Obviously, that's a 2-for-1 against us, but in board states like this, that sort of thing can really matter. Okay, so they fragment Necro and we don't actually get anything off it, so that's probably another change I need to make. I have been considering that. Maybe trimming a third surgical to run a 2-drop that we can consistently get if they choose to fragment the Necro. Could run something like Deep Cavern Bat potentially, or maybe Scavenging Ooze would be good because, you know, most of the Fragment Reality decks do utilise the graveyard, whether that's Emperor of Bones or Overlord of the Belmerk. Okay, so the opponent's starting to take out lands, but thankfully I think we have enough here where it shouldn't really matter too much. And I think I will actually get rid of this Enduring Innocence. Right, opponent's only got 3 cards in hand here. This is a very attrition-based matchup. And so, being able to wipe out their card advantage engine, even though it's like a 2-for-1 against us, is pretty good here, I think. So, here I think we just... I think I'm going to lead on Boggart Trawler. I want to use Decay at instant speed, you know, try and force them into a suboptimal play of running out a creature when it might not be the best line to try and draw a card. And then we can just decay the Innocence in response. Okay, so now they go for Containment Priest. Now's the time to get rid of the Innocence. And again, you know, not great 2-for-1ing yourself, but I'm pretty sure that Enduring Innocence is going to draw them more cards than, you know, the 2-for-1 would cost us, if that makes sense. So I think we might as well just play a Sorin here, right? They could obviously have ways to stop it, but, you know, starting to gain 3 life back is pretty nice. There's a chance they don't block here because they want to, you know, keep the Containment Priest around in order to shut off the minus. You know, as far as the opponent's concerned, I could very well have an Elender in hand right now. But obviously we couldn't use the minus on Sorin because of the Containment Priest, so... So we're attacking here. Hopefully they don't have like a 3-tree battalion or something like that. Wow, okay. Another instance where having a 2-drop in the sideboard for fragment decks would be really useful. So yeah, I think that's another change I'm going to make after this. Wow, they go face. I guess that makes sense because, you know, they feel like they've probably got Sorin on lock. Thoughtseize is a pretty nice draw here though. We get to see what the opponent's got going on. I mean, obviously, you know, we have a lot of better draws. Shieldred or Necro would be the best here, but, you know, Thoughtseize isn't too bad, especially because it looks like the opponent's on a pretty interactive draw, so information is actually pretty valuable. So what could the opponent have in response here? Maybe they're thinking of reprieving it again, even interrupt maybe. They do reprieve it again, but I mean, that doesn't seem very good to me, right? We can just Thoughtseize and we get more information now. They've drawn an extra card. Huh. Okay, interesting. I think we just take the Containment Priest here, right? They can obviously get lost Sorin, but we have a backup. They can obviously get lost Elender if we do draw one here, but, you know, if we do draw an Elender, we need to have answers for Containment Priest anyway, so... Interesting spot, though, because I think Shielded is one of our better draws in this situation, and so... Maybe it's better to take out the... You know, they've already got Containment Priest that we don't have an answer for. Maybe it's best to just let them have another one. And then they don't have an answer to Shieldred, for example. But Sorin Elender is such a big part of the deck that... You know, I don't think it matters too much. Okay, Cut Down is a sick draw here. Because now we can take out the Containment Priest. You know, we have way more... We have more than enough mana that we don't care about Esper Sentinel. If we take out the Containment Priest, now all of a sudden top deck Elender is really good, and I think it makes sense to do it now. Just, you know, prevent the 2 extra damage. And now I think there's actually a decent chance the opponent might get lost to Sorin, because now, you know, we could have just been slow rolling with Elender in hand. I mean, if we had Cut Down, we probably should have done it main phase, but now Elender is a good top deck as well, so I think it would make sense for the opponent... Oh, wow. I was going to say, I think it would make sense for the opponent to use Get Lost on the Sorin here, but obviously great draw from us. But we still have a lot of decent draws in this situation as well. Actually, thinking about it, I mean, we did get paid off majorly for taking the Containment Priest with Thoughtseize there, but Get Lost also takes out Necrodominance, so if I could go back to that situation again with the knowledge I've got now, I think I would probably... Well, not even the knowledge I've got now. I think just looking back on it, it was probably better to take Get Lost there, because then Shieldred's a really good draw, Necrodominance is a really good draw. The only thing we really care about is Sorin. But I guess, you know, we had 2 Sorins in hand, or we had 2 Sorins in general, so maybe it makes more sense to just focus on Elender as a top deck. Not 100% sure. It's an interesting choice. And obviously, you know, we did get paid off for going for it as well. So, okay, Culling Ritual we don't want here, obviously. And then we can just crack the map again here, try and dig towards something else. But yeah, I feel like we're in a really good spot now. Obviously, that Elender top deck was great, and we did get lucky taking the Containment Priest over the Get Lost there. But, you know, I think it's close. I think there is definitely logic to taking the second Containment Priest when we have 2 Sorins already. But, yeah, Get Lost is actually a pretty good card against, well, a lot of what our deck's doing. Okay, so they Get Lost, the Sorin, but we've got a backup. So, our draws have lined up pretty well here, not going to lie. But having said that, I think if we do have basics in the deck, we probably don't end up losing game 1. So, yeah, okay, opponent just scoops up. So we got there, nice. Okay, here we go then, final round. So if we get this, we get the 30 packs and all that stuff. And I'm always running out of wild cards, so that's always useful. Okay, so we're on the draw. Not ideal. We've got a 1-lander here, so we've got to ship this one back. You know, if we had maybe Sorin Elender, there's maybe a chance you keep that on the draw, but... Wow, okay, this isn't great either, but... I don't like mulling below 6 in general, because there's so many discard spells in the format right now. And we do have a lot of good draws. We do have some interaction to slow the opponent down. Okay, so opponent leads on Shadowy Backstreet. Almost certainly going to be on Orzhov, I'd imagine. Right, I don't think you'd run Surveil Lands if you were on 3 colours. Could be wrong on that, but... And I guess we'll find out in a second of Thoughtseize, so... Yeah, opponent in the tank about this first of all. But yeah, definitely going to run out Thoughtseize after Hive of the Eye Tyrant here. In terms of top decks, Assemble the Team is great, Shieldred's great, Necrodominance is great, Elender's great. And this is the nice thing as well about running Shieldred Necro. They're both individually good. You don't need them together. Oh, wow. I mean... So the tricky thing here is obviously they can use Overlord to get back the Felia here, but it's just slower, right? If we take one of the Overlords, then they can just run out Felia on turn 2 and then play Overlord and blink it straight away. Whereas this way forces them, if they want to do that, to play Felia this turn, which doesn't trigger until the following turn, and we have Fatal Push to stop it attacking as well. So it looks like that's what they're going for here. So not drawing particularly well, just drawing lands and removal spells here, but opponent's not really doing anything either. As long as they don't draw a Dollmaker here, I think we should be good. So I'm going to use Fatal Push during the upkeep just in case they have a protection spell. Okay, now they go for Troll during my end steps. Now they're tapped out. I'll let them pick a land first just so they have fewer information, and then we'll fire off the push on the Felia here. Because there's obviously a chance they might get a Surveil land instead if they're running a second one, if they know that they're not going to have Felia next turn, whereas they probably want more untapped mana if they know they are. I mean, again, they can use Overlord to get back Felia here, but it's, you know, it's slower. They're not going to get a proper Overlord back until later, and if they do go for Felia here, we can obviously push it as well, so... The opponent did mill over Peddler, so there is a chance they go for Juggernaut Peddler, but even if they do... presumably they take the Sorin here. Maybe the push if they've got another threat they care about, but then we still get a 4/4. You know, a 4-mana 5/3. Okay, they do go for Felia, which is perfect with what we've got going on here. Now we do need to... Oh, wow, okay. I was going to say, we do need to be concerned about this Overlord just manually turning into a 5/5 once all these counters go, but... You know, now we can go Sorin Elender. We can use Invoke the Divine to take out the Overlord there. So obviously Elender was a great draw, but, you know, if we drew Assemble the Team, that can help us find Elender. And like I said, the fact that Necro and Shieldred are good on their own just make our top deck so much better. Okay, there's Felia, so we're obviously going to push that. And again, I think it's best to do it now. I very much doubt that Orzhov is running any ways to protect their creatures, but, you know, might as well. There's no downside to doing it when they're tapped out. Wow, okay, there's Shieldred, so now we can just start snowballing the game. We can give the 4/4 lifelink, attacking with both. I mean, we do know that they've got Iganjo, so that does, cut us off the life gain there. But, we still gain 4. And maybe there's an argument to plussing on the Elender instead, but, then that kind of gives the opponent the opportunity to save it if it is good for them, right? Doing it this way kind of forces them to use it straight away. Okay, yeah, opponent just scoops up, so that felt pretty good. Post sideboard here, so we haven't seen Emperor of Bones. I actually think from what we've seen so far, because they're on the One Ring, they're unlikely to be on Emperor of Bones and Ulamog anyway, which is the only thing we really care about. Emperor of Bones on like Overlord and just other fair stuff is fine for the most part, I think. But because we haven't seen Emperor and we have seen the One Ring, I'm going to have to assume that Overlord of the Baelmerk is probably their only graveyard interaction, at which point Surgical is just, just doesn't do anything really. Because, if you could, if they had to target the card with Overlord, then Surgical would be interesting. But because they pick it in, as the card resolves, I don't think it's worth it. Okay, so game 2 obviously going to be on the draw here. But I felt, honestly, pretty favoured against the Orzhov decks. We have a lot more interaction than most lists, especially discard spells, which is really important because, if you think about the Orzhov list, they've got Sorin, Elender, Overlord, Dollmaker. So discard spells are pretty good because you can just, take apart one of those two and then, Dollmaker doesn't really do much on its own. Sorin and Elender don't do much on their own either. So discard spells are really good in this sort of matchup. Not to mention, both Necro and Shieldred are really good here. Necro is just a good way of going over the top of Elender, even if the opponent has one already. Okay, so opponent chooses to take out the Assemble the Team, which makes sense, considering we have the Sorin here. Okay, interesting. So I think we just take the Felia here. Obviously, the One Ring is a concern, but we've got a second Thoughtseize here. So unless they draw a Thoughtseize of their own, I think we just go Thoughtseize again next turn, take the One Ring, and then we should just be good to go for Necro the following turn. And there's nothing. I mean, they do have Porcine Portent, right? But that costs 6 mana total to answer Necro at sorcery speed as well. So drawing more lands isn't ideal, but we do get to get rid of the One Ring. We can play a land tapped, and obviously conserving our life total when we have Necrodominance is pretty big here. But the opponent's not applying any pressure to our life total at all, so it shouldn't really matter. Now we can just jam the Necro, and I think we'll grab 5 here. Okay, sick. We found the Elender. Perfect. I think we can put back the Necro and just put back a land here. Maybe it makes more sense to keep the non-Takenuma land because we're basically forced to play it here anyway. Okay, opponent does draw Thoughtseize here, so they can take the Elender, which is presumably what they're forced to do here, but we still just jam Sorin next turn, draw a bunch of extra cards. Again, we're not under any pressure on our life total at all here. Okay, so they shock in the land. They do have access to Porcine Portent here. But we can just play Sorin. We can plus it. There's nothing they can really do about that. And then I think we'll draw 4 here. I don't want to go too low. Okay, we do find the Shieldred, which is pretty big. Opponent obviously has the Porcine Portent here, though. But we can potentially go Break Expectations first. We also can, we go Break Expectations, Assemble to try and find an Elender. And then we can play the Blooming Marsh. Okay, so they have another discard spell, and they can give us a card to be able to cast one of our cards here. So they could maybe go, take Shieldred and have it available to themselves, which would be scary, but wow, they choose not to. Okay, that's huge. So now I think we just go Shieldred, right? I was going to go Break Expectations into Assemble the Team. Sorry, not Assemble the Team, but just Break Expectations, play a land to get rid of the Porcine Portent. But now they're tapped out. They don't have any way to answer Shieldred here. We can just, go down to 1, draw a bunch of cards, start gaining life. So even if they do take out the Shieldred here, which they presumably will, probably before they draw a card, we still have enough life to just keep activating it. And obviously they're investing most of their mana on the portent, so now if they do draw something good, we should hopefully be able to hit it with the Break Expectations. Okay, they draw a Thoughtseize here, which is a little bit rough. But again, we're not under any pressure on our life total here, so we should just be able to activate Necro again next turn. And at this point, you know, we've got 6 lands, so we should be able to utilize whatever we draw fairly consistently. Okay, interesting, yeah. So they take Abrupt Decay, which makes sense. Oh, I sometimes forget that it can't take Fatal Push. That was obviously a misplay. I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter too much because we're likely just discarding it here anyway. Okay, we get Shieldred, we get Elender. Now we should be good. I think, yeah, pitch a land, pitch a Fatal Push here. They don't have any creatures, so we don't need to worry too much about that. If they go for the early Portent to get the first little pig, we can obviously push it before they can activate it to kill the Necro, so I feel pretty good here. Oh, wow, okay. Overlord's a good top deck. Wow, they find the Dollmaker as well. So that is a very good draw from the opponent, but I think it's too little too late. Right, we can minus to get the Elender into play, which we can then use to kill the Overlord, and because they don't have mana up, they can't use Dollmaker to give it indestructible here either. So, not to mention we've also got Shieldred as well, so I think we should be good here. See what they hit though. And then, depending on what they pick, we might also just Fatal Push the Dollmaker, just so any future tokens they get, they can't give indestructible. Interesting. So they choose to go for a Elender, which I guess makes sense, because from their point of view, the only way they're going to win this is just with good draws, and drawing Sorin with a Elender in hand is potentially a way they could get back into it, but now we can just go Elender, invoke the Divine Overlord, Thoughtseize away the Elender, cast Shieldred, and that should be the game, right? There's no way they can really come back from that, unless they have a board sweeper maybe, but even then we can just keep drawing off the Necro, so yeah, we should be good here. And here we can go up to 7, because the opponent is tapped out. And also they don't have any instant speed burn anyway. The only times you really need to be concerned about that are against Wizards, if they're running Wizards Lightning, obviously, and Goblin Bombardment decks as well. So you can just pitch the lands here. Obviously, you do need to be wary about your how many cards you got left in the deck as well when you're activating Necro. But you know, if you're getting near the end, you're probably in a winning position anyway. So yeah, sick. We got there nice. Got the 7-0. Got the 30 packs, which is sick because I'm always running out of wild cards. But yeah, the deck has felt great. Felt really good on ladder, and also just felt really adaptable as well. The fact you have so many slots for interaction means that if the metagame does shift, feels like Black-Green has enough tools in its arsenal that you should be able to tweak the list depending on how the metagame evolves. So yeah, very happy with the deck for sure. And I'm obviously going to be trying out a bunch of other decks, but I think this is still probably my front runner for the qualifier. But yeah, either way, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you on the next one. Big up.